Over the years, I've acquired a lot of tools that I need quick access to. And like many of you, I've always battled with the best way to organize them for my space. So today, let's end that struggle once and for all with some innovative solutions for the tool wall on Timber Biscuit. One of the most important things that I've learned over my woodworking career is that when you need a tool, it's really important that you can get to it quickly. There's nothing worse than having to dig through tool bags and over other tools to try to find that square that you know you need, or in most cases, the tape measure. You know what I'm talking about. And over the years, that's one of the things that I've really focused on with my shop's workflow. Now, I know a lot of you are probably saying to yourselves, wait, you've already got a French cleat wall, why would you need to change? Well, to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of French cleat walls, and I'll dive into why as we go through the process today. So the first step on this organizational journey was to take down all my tools and figure out what I wanted to hang on my tool wall. Now, for my case, I'm going to be really focused on layout tools as they're the ones that I kind of reach for the most. When it comes to hand tools and those types of things, I've already got those mostly covered, but my layout tools are all over the place, so this should wrangle them in. Then from there, I could map out the size of the board that I want to hang and cut it down. Now for my tool wall, I'm going to be using 3/4 Baltic birch, but use whatever material you feel accents your shop. A good amount of my shop furniture is built from Baltic birch plywood, so it fits really well. And as I've said in the past, I feel like your shop should reflect the type of woodworking you want to do, and that was another goal for me with this project. So with that in mind, what you see me doing here is just milling down some scrap walnut that I have left over from some other projects. What I want to do with this is just break it down into a couple strips that I'll use to frame out my Baltic birch sheet. Now, again here, as regular viewers of the channel will know, this is just my lumber preference. Feel free to use whatever lumber you feel represents you and your shop. I think shop furniture is also a really fun time to try something new or play with other lumber species that you don't normally use. I'm just sticking with walnut because I have a ton of it in the shop that I really need to work through. And as an added bonus, I'll be addressing some of that organization in the shop as well in this video because I've got some new tools coming in that I need to make space for. So I gotta get these offcuts organized. So with my walnut cut down into some thinner strips, I'll take those pieces over to my planer to thickness them down. Now I often get questions about why I choose to use my bandsaw over my table saw for ripping down lumber like this. And the reason I do so is because I feel like it's a lot safer to rip down lumber at the bandsaw than it is at the table saw. And that's especially true for work pieces that might have a lot of built-up tension inside them, like these long, thin pieces. And as I'm shooting this video, it's winter, so it's cooler and drier in the shop than normal, and I'll take whatever precautions I can to alleviate some risk. I guess you could say like a baby jalapeno shivering, it's a little chilly. So with my strips to their final thickness, I took the work pieces back over to the table saw to cut in the rabbets. Now, again, I'm going to make these essentially like a large picture frame, where I'll cut a rabbet into the back side of each of my 4 pieces, and then I'll trim them down to their final length as I cut the miters for the frame. So in this case, rather than using a dado stack, what I'll do here is just cut my first groove, then rotate the piece 90 degrees, and cut a second groove, which will leave me with a nice flat rabbet. The only trick here is to make sure that you're using a ripping blade that has a flat tooth grind. This way you're left with a nice flat rabbet when everything's done. And if you do have a little material remaining, you can easily clean those up with a shoulder plane, a router plane, or even just some chisels. And with that being said, just remember at the end of the day, this is shop furniture, not a museum quality piece. And so you're all clear on that, I'll put on my glasses. Alright, so the next step in the process was to go ahead and swap in my ripping blade for a crosscut blade and tilt that guy to 45 degrees. From there, I'll just use a miter gauge to go ahead and cut 45-degree miters onto one edge of all my work pieces, and I'll take those pieces over to my panel to mark out the final length. Now here I'm not going to measure anything. I actually don't know what the final length of any of these pieces are. Instead, I'll just use a bevel gauge to mark everything out at 45 degrees right at the corner. Once I have that marking, I can take my workpiece back over to the table saw and trim it down to the final length. This gives me really tight and accurate miters without having to do any actual measuring. Nice. From there, I just repeat that process and take my workpieces back over to the table saw once the dust collector is working again and cut them down to their final length. And I just do this working my way around the frame until I have all 4 sides, and then I can glue them in place. I know there's a lot of different ways to cut and build frames like this, but I find that just mocking them up and marking them out is the fastest and most accurate way to do so. But let me know down in the comments if you prefer a jig or just mocking up your frames. If you mock them up, start your comment with mock up. If you use a jig, start your comment with jig. And if you start your comment with jig or mock up, I'll reply to you guys first, because as always, I know you're paying attention. So here I'm just attaching the frame to my sheet, and I'm going to use some 23 gauge brad nails to hold everything in place. And thanks to the magic of editing, that's done pretty quickly. So while the glue dries on those, I'm going to take a moment to start organizing some of this extra lumber. And the first thing I want to do is just make a quick lumber rack for the corner. Now again here, I've got some extra scrap Baltic birch, so I'm just going to use that for my lumber rack. The first thing I did was just measure out the thickness of my Baltic birch, as that can kind of vary from board to board. And once I had that measurement, I just set my dado stack up accordingly. From there, I'll plow a dado on either end of my board, and then split my board into roughly 5 sections and plow in 3 more. Now this isn't an exact science or anything, I'm just going by what will fit my space. From there, I cut out 5 strips and then marked out a curve on the end. This is just to ease that outside facing edge. Once I had it marked out, I could take all 5 work pieces over to my bandsaw and rough cut them out. Again, here I'm not going for perfection, but I'm going to try to stay as close to my line as possible. And once I have those cut out, I'll quickly clean them up with a little sandpaper. Now these curves aren't going to be perfect, but again, they don't have to be because it's shop furniture. The next step was to apply a little glue to my dado and then pin those pieces in place. From there, I'll just pre-drill out some holes for some eye hooks and pop those eye hooks onto the ends of the boards. This will hold a couple lengths of chain that I'll use to keep my boards in place. The next step was to pre-drill and countersink some holes for some mounting screws, and then I could mount the rack to the wall. This worked out really well for me for getting all these scrap pieces corralled and getting them off the floor and collected in one place in the shop. Any boards that I felt were too large for this area were numbered and placed on my wall hanging lumber rack, then added to a spreadsheet. This way I can track all the lumber I have in the shop and I'm not tripping over scraps. And before we get back to the tool wall, let me take a quick moment to say that if you guys are enjoying this video, please give it a like. It allows the video to spread to other people, and I greatly appreciate your support. So over the course of the next day or so, I played around with the layout for my tools. I didn't want to set anything up and then instantly regret it later on, so I gave myself a little time to familiarize myself with their placement. And once I was satisfied with that, I went ahead and started cutting out some of the hangers. Now, some of the hangers I'm going to use here are kind of unique to my own situation, but they should work for 90% of the layout tools you own. So the first thing I want to do is just address some of my larger squares. And to hang those up, I'm going to cut out some thin strips with the groove down the center. Again, my goal here is to match my own aesthetic, and because I design and build furniture with clean, modern lines, I want these hangers to feel the same way, which is something I can't really achieve with a French cleat. So once I had my hangers ripped down to their final width, I went ahead and took them over to my panel so I could mark them out for the final length. Then back over the table saw, I could use my miter sled to cut them down. Now this is one of the new tools that I was talking about adding to the shop earlier on in the video. I've been asking you guys whether you prefer sleds or miter gauges for the last couple episodes, and it was kind of in preparation for this edition. The best way I can describe this is that it's a combination of a sled and a miter gauge, and it's called the Auto Scale Sled by Woodpeckers. And as I work with it, I'll continue to give my opinion about what I like and don't like about it. But right off the bat, I can tell you that this tool is rock solid, and it works really well for cutting down smaller parts. One of my biggest complaints about my other miter gauge was that it takes so long to dial everything in. With this tool, the setup is really quick, and it has a lot of weight to it, so it feels really solid. But in no way is this a sponsored video or post or anything, I just want you guys to know what I like and why I like it. So with the bulk of the material removed from the center of my T-square hanger, I can use a combination of my chisels and a shoulder plane to smooth everything out and make sure that the T-square sits in nice and snug. I think this is one of the few instances where I actually used hand tools on this project, and that's because I wanted a nice snug fit, so it was more utilitarian than it was for aesthetics. But I guess like Harry Styles, that idea works in more than one direction. So with the hangers all cut down, I could go ahead and start tacking them in place. Now here I'm going to use setup blocks to make sure that I orient everything square to the trim as well as square to each other. It would really suck to hang this thing on the wall and have everything crooked, so the setup blocks work great to help keep things straight. Just remember to account for gravity. So with the large squares out of the way, I turned my attention to the carpenter square. Now the carpenter square has a unique triangle knockout in the center, so I decided to take advantage of that and use it for the holder. Now though I do have a CNC, I think it's a lot faster just to go ahead and mark out and cut this out by hand because it only takes like 2 minutes. So once I had my outline traced out, I just took the workpiece over to the bandsaw and cut it out. And then from there I'll take the workpiece back over to the table and sand everything flush. With a little elbow grease, it'll fit perfectly inside the center of my triangle, and I'll have a nice snug fit. Which again is not the presentation I'd get with the French cleat. I think you're getting the picture. From there again, I'll use some glue, setup blocks, and 23 gauge brad nails to tack it in place. Because if you're going to get in the car, you may as well go to town. Alright, so next it was time to pull a trick out of the hat and make a quick dowel cutter. And the first thing I'll do is just drive a hole in some scrap that's the exact diameter of the dowels that I want. So in my case, that'll be 5/16 of an inch. And then from there, I'll just use a few countersink bits to chamfer the hole on one side of the workpiece. This will allow for a smoother entry for my dowel stock. Next, I head over to the bandsaw and trim off just to the edge of my hole, which will expose a small gap in the top of my through hole. Then from there, I'm going to square off the stock that I want to use for my dowel to just over the outside diameter of 5/16 of an inch. And I'll repeat this by rotating the workpiece 45 degrees and ripping off that next corner. From there, I'll clamp a chisel at a slight angle to the top of my block where I made the notch in the hole. Then chuck my stock into my drill and drill through the hole. If I keep everything relatively straight, it'll give me a straight, consistent dowel through the other side. From there, I can trim off the length I need and then add it to the tool wall. And while I wrap that up, let me take a quick moment to say that if you're enjoying this video, make sure you subscribe. I put out new videos about woodworking projects with tips and tricks all the time, so subscribe so you don't miss the next one. So to mount the dowel, I'll first start my drill in reverse, then throw it into second gear and plunge a 1/2 inch deep hole into my panel. From there, I'll use a little glue and a rubber mallet to secure the dowel in place. Then, like a scientist watching the earth for 24 hours, I called it a day. Back in the shop, I went ahead and cut out some smaller rectangles to mount my smaller rules. These will allow for a nice low profile mount. And then again, I'll use some brad nails and glue to hold them in place. From there, I took a few of those rectangular pieces and rounded them over so that I could mount my bevel square. What I really like about this solution is that it keeps the bevel square nice and tight to the tool wall without adding any bulky hangers. I'd say this is a prime less is more situation. Next, I headed over to the table saw to trim out some triangles. I'll use these triangles to hang my larger combination squares from. In doing so, it keeps the profile really small, and I think it works really well to hold them in place. This is honestly the only portion of the tool wall that I wasn't certain on the placement. And that's because I know that I have a couple of squares in mind that I want for the future, so I tried to leave that section a bit more open so that I could expand later on. Now, when it came to mounting the double squares, I again decided just to use some small blocks. The main difference here is that with one of the squares, I had to add a little groove so that it could inset into the block, but other than that, I could just tack those in place like I did the previous ones, which was starting to feel like Groundhog Day. Like when my wife and I argue, and I always get the last word in. That's usually, I'm sorry, and you're right. So my last set of hangers was probably my most unique set in that most of these tools have an odd shape. So the first thing I decided to tackle was the dividers. And here I'm going to treat this kind of like I did the carpenter square, and then I'm going to use the negative space as the hanger. Now each set of dividers is ultimately going to have its own unique shape, so you'll have to reference off your own to see what that shape is. But utilizing that negative space created for a secure hanging solution. Next on the list was the marking gauge. And since I utilize a wheel marking gauge, I'm going to mount these the same way that I mounted my chisels, which was just to create a small hanger that it could nestle into. So once I had drilled a hole through my workpiece, I could take the workpiece over to the bandsaw and cut out a notch with the thumb screws. Then from there, I could head back over to the table saw and cut it down to its final width. Once I had checked to confirm that the fit was perfect, I could finally mount the remaining holds to the panel. And while I wrap that up, let me take this moment to say that if you guys are enjoying these videos and you'd like to support the channel, I'd like to invite you to join my Patreon. There you'll get discount codes on plans and merch, an invite to the Discord server, your name on the shop wall, free project plans, behind the scenes footage, and a whole lot more. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, be sure to check out the link down in the description and join today. And as always, to all you who've already joined, thank you so much for your continued support. Your donations go directly towards making these videos. So thank you. Alright, so the last two pieces to the tool wall puzzle were maybe the most important, and that's going to be my tape measures. And yes, I do keep metric and imperial tapes because I'm decilingual. So I have these little clasps on the back of mine that I'm going to use to hang off the tool wall, and I just needed to trim those dowels down so they felt comfortable. So with those all flush trimmed, I could go ahead and start filling in the pinholes and sanding back the wood filler. Now, to be completely honest with you, I don't know if this is a fully necessary step, but I figured since I'm going to be looking at this thing all the time, I better make it as smooth as I can. I know, I'm picking and choosing my battles with this shop furniture thing. From there, I could lay out and countersink a few holes for mounting this panel to the wall. And with everything cleaned up, I could move on to the finish. Now, for the finish on this piece, I'm just going to use some stuff that I have laying around in the shop, which is just going to be some Danish oil. I've used this on a couple of other projects in the shop, and I like the way it looks overall, and it holds up fairly well. But like I've said in the past, I think this is a good opportunity to try something new. If there's some finish technique that you haven't done before, but you want to try, I'd say shop furniture is a place to go for it. The next step was to use my previously attached cleat as a support and mount it to the wall. From there, I could start filling everything in, and again, thanks to the magic of editing, they just kind of appear. So now that all the tools are hung with care, there's only one thing left to do. Let's cue those glamour shots. And there we have it. A tool wall any craftsman would be proud of. Everything's organized, in place, and where it's supposed to be. which I for one love about a workshop. And this type of organization allows me to work more freely in my shop and ensures all my tools are easy to locate when I need them, which, let's be honest, is half the battle when you're in the midst of a project frenzy. And let's not forget about the lumber organization. This is going to make finding parts in the shop a heck of a lot easier. And it also has the added benefit of increasing the safety in the shop. Less tripping hazards and all. And I think probably the best part about this whole experience is that it just really cleans up the entire look of the shop. Again, I strive to make the place that I work reflect the type of work that I want to create. So if I feel good about the place I'm building, then I'll feel good about the work. So if you enjoyed this build and you want to see more like it, check out this video over here next. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And as always, I knew this would work, and I'll see you next time.